Good evening, everyone. Before we go on with the meeting, could I please ask that any members or officers in attendance with an electronic device mute it to avoid feedback? And I see that Councillor MacDonald is not in here. That's good, because he failed to put his phone on silent in the last meeting we were in. To guests attending remotely via Teams, of which there is one, please could you keep your camera and microphone off unless you wish to speak, and ideally not use the camera at all, as this can affect the quality of the IT connection, although if it's only one person, I don't suppose it'll affect it too much. Please be advised that this meeting may be recorded, and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. In addition, the recording may be added to the Council website. If any councillors are accessing the meeting remotely, it is advised that you use your Swale or KCC laptop to participate. If you join using the link on the website or on a mobile tablet device, it is not always possible to identify you, and you may not be recorded as in remote attendance. Please can members speak loudly and clearly into their microphones on these snazzy new shiny mics we've got. Sorry, I lost my place there. I shouldn't do these asides. And switch the microphone off after speaking to enable remote participants to hear the next speaker. On to the meeting. Welcome everyone to the Environment Committee meeting, and welcome to any councillors and members of the public joining us remotely this evening, and welcome to Councillor Gibson, our new addition to the committee, although technically tonight he is a substitute. In addition to the members of the committee, we have the following officers in attendance with us this evening. Head of Environment and Leisure, Martin Cassell, to my left. Environmental Services Manager, Alistair Andrews, to his left. Climate Change Officer, Janet Hill, to his left. And Democratic Services, Philippa Davis. Hi. Because of the this is just a little aside from me. Because of the cancellation of our November meeting for Storm Ciarán, it's been a while since this committee last met. Just to provide some reassurance that things have been happening since that last committee meeting, which was during a heatwave in September. We've had a number of meetings of the Climate Emergency Steering Group, the Air Quality Action Plan Steering Group, and the Waste Management Contract Steering Group, members of which had the opportunity to visit a facility in Crayford, which sorts all of the recycling from our blue bins. And last but not least, we also had a very enjoyable and productive Green Grid meeting in Merston, where a number of stakeholders from our various partner organisations and local environmental groups came and updated each other on their activities. Dolly and I would like to thank all of the officers involved in helping ensure that these meetings all run smoothly. I think they're an excellent way of ensuring that members from all political groups have an opportunity to see the work that's being undertaken and have some input into the work that the council is doing in this area. Thank you. Please be advised that no fire drill is planned this evening. If the alarm sounds, those in attendance should leave via the exits indicated and assemble outside where directed. Do not use the lift. If anyone in attendance requires extra assistance, please make yourselves known to us so that we can assist. Philippa, do we have any apologies for absence or substitutes this evening?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Mike Henderson, who is substituted
This is obviously not a virtual meeting, is it?
by Councillor Charles Gibson, and also Councillor Roger Clark is attending remotely. Thank you.
Thank you.
He's online.
Do members approve the minutes of the meeting held on 7th of September 2023? Great, thank you. And are there any declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda tonight? Doesn't look like it. Great. So let's move on to item 5, which is the procurement of minor maintenance and cleansing of public conveniences service. Is this going to be you introducing this? Alistair. Over to Alistair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper recommends awarding the minor maintenance and cleansing of public conveniences contract to Company X. So in August 2021, members discussed public conveniences and agreed to extend the current contract into the final extension phase, which now ends on the 31st of March this year. In June 2023, members had a further discussion around public conveniences, and it was agreed to tender for a 1 + 1 year contract to create the time for a full review of public conveniences to take place. This report shows the results from that piece of work. Public conveniences have been identified in the medium-term financial strategy as an area for further savings. We now know that a further £50,000 savings required on public conveniences next year and another £100,000 the year after, hence the need for a full review of how we deliver these services. The tender asked for 2 prices, mainly around the as-is model, with 5 facilities attended, and as a model with no attendance. In the knowledge that we may need to do something more creative, we also invited the industry to recommend and price what they would put forward as a partially attended option. We also welcomed any variant bids as well, if the industry could consider other alternative options. Company X put a partially attended option forward that suited their business model, and that's the option that we're recommending tonight. Due to the revised figures in the medium-term financial strategy, this option would result in an estimated £69,000 overspend for 24-25, as there's a reduction to those budgets, which I've already mentioned. And if we extended into the second year of 25-26, then that'd be a larger overspend, as there's a further saving to be made within the medium-term financial strategy. So with that in mind, if the recommendation is agreed at Environment Committee tonight, then the finances will need to be approved by the Policy and Resources Committee in February prior to any award.
Thank you, Alistair. Does anyone have any questions? Dolly. Councillor Worcester.
I've only just noticed that these have changed, so I will try my best with these just to, if I get it wrong, give me a bit of leeway, please, Chair. Thanks. Can I just check that this isn't part of Swale's statutory duty to provide, is it? Providing these cleanses. So I wanted to just make a point to members of the committee that obviously times are hard, and we're seeing more and more councils going into special measures and really quite dire straits. So I am in favour of making sure that this council provides its statutory requirements to our residents rather than putting ourselves in poor straits. So all of these things are fantastic if we can provide them on really sunny days, but I want to make sure that, for instance, we can retain control of our bin collections and other really important factors. And I will just remind people that, as far as I'm aware, every bit of vandalism that has taken place in our public conveniences, like the £140,000 problem that we've encountered at Barton's Point, has taken place when these toilets and things would not be manned anyway. So for the cleanliness, I understand it, but there is definitely no question here in my mind that there is no extra security provided to these conveniences by having somebody actually man these. So I will personally be looking at the budget constraints when I make my decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to come back on that at all, Alistair? No? Yep. Anyone else got any questions? To clarify, Company X here is not the one owned by Elon Musk, formerly known as Twitter. It is a different Company X. If, in the absence of any further questions, I will then propose that we go with the recommendations 1 and 2. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Worcester. Is everyone happy with that? Can I have a show of hands? That is unanimous. Thank you. Great. Thank you. Agenda item 5 is the Climate and Ecological Emergency Progress Report. Is this going to be you, Janet, leading on this, or Martin? Janet, thank you.
Good evening, councillors. Okay, so we had our declaration of climate emergency back in June 2019, and part of the motion was that we would have an annual report. So this is the 5th annual report on the progress. The first one covered the first 6 months of the action plan, and then every year after that we've done a full annual report. So this is the 5th one that we've done, and I think all of you are aware of the background that, you know, we had the motion, we had the declaration, then we developed an action plan, and now we're working to deliver that action plan. And year on year we've made progress. I think now there's only 2 actions that haven't actually started. All the rest are progressing, and quite a lot are complete. You'll find the full report as an appendix to this one, and that's the one that will be going on the website and will go to council in 2 weeks' time. So some of the highlights of the report this time round, and Councillor Lehman's already touched on the steering group. We have a very strong steering group with councillors from across the council and also officers right across the council who own various actions within that action plan. So they all come along, and we meet every 6 weeks or so and keep the momentum going. The refurbishment of the 2nd floor of Swale House is now complete, and the Master's House is fully refurbished and has been successfully let out. Most of our fleet now have been replaced with electric vehicles and reduced our carbon footprint for our services. And the ground maintenance contract has seen new electric vehicles. And going forward, the new bin contract, or the waste contract, sorry, will be, we're not going fully EV, but we hope to reduce fuel use by 10 to 15%, and all the support vehicles will be electric vehicles. The Improvement Resilient Fund enabled projects to help the emergency, including LED lighting. That programme is still rolling out. Tree planting, the car clubs, EV charging points, and air quality measures. And we're working with KCC to look at more active travel, wider adoption of electric vehicles, and charging points. And I know that KCC voted to accept the government funding Kent-wide. They voted on that last week. So that programme will start, and there's 12 million coming down across Kent for on-street EV provision. So that will be rolled out in time. We're working with schools close to the AQMAs to try and get people using more sustainable travel to get to school. We've had an education programme developed which is available to schools to use, and we've done air quality technical guidance for planners. And the anti-idling campaign has been rolled out, largely outside schools and in taxi ranks where most of the idling goes on. We haven't actually issued any notices, but drivers have been spoken to and generally responded positively when they've been picked up for idling. The declaration stated that we would eliminate single-use plastics from Swale House, and we've done really well. We did an audit across the council, and most of the single-use plastics have gone, and there's recycling opportunities in the staff areas, things like crisp packets, bubble packs, that sort of thing. So, yeah. Fuel and water advice service was developed as a way of reaching our more vulnerable citizens around carbon saving and reducing energy bills, and that's been a really vital service. We funded it for 2 years initially, and then a 3rd year, and we've managed to get some outside funding to keep that service going, and that's delivered via children and families. And over 1,500 households have been helped with advice, and over 2,500 had fuel vouchers this last year. Via the off-road charging scheme, we got government funding for charging points, and across the borough we've had 10 twin chargers have been installed. Took a long time to do. because you're working with multiple agencies, but they're all up and running now, and they're being well used. If you go into the car parks where they are, you'll see them being well used. We set up a car club in Faversham in May 2022, and another in Sittingbourne last March. And we had, in Faversham, we've got 2 hybrid and 1 electric. In Sittingbourne, for various reasons, we're going to just stick with 3 hybrids at the moment. And to date, the clubs have reached a utilisation rate of up to 50%, which was more than expected. And we're having a real push at the moment on the Sittingbourne one to try and get more take-up on Sittingbourne. And we're also working with developers. So when a big development comes forward, we're encouraging developers to either put in their own car club or join up with ours. So there'll be more car clubs going forward, we hope. The Planning Committee has been quite successful in raising energy efficiency measures within planning developments. We've encouraged developers to go for 50% savings over emissions, over the building regs. And the emerging local plan will bring this down to 0, hopefully by 2030. We've written guidance for developers on how to get there, and that guidance is being revised currently while we're, as technology and everything develops. We've planted 295 standard trees and 14,000 whips, and the tree planting programme is going on. We've got funding for 2 more years, and hopefully we might get some of the national, you may have heard about the National Highways scheme, where they haven't got places to put their trees, so we can have some of their trees as well, and that'll be a 5-year programme. COVID accelerated our move into meetings like this, where we've got hybrid meetings, virtual meetings, and there are still challenges, but we're working on the education campaigns, particularly with household waste, which did increase. Kent Wildlife Trust has approached Swale to be a partner in their 3Cs project, which is looking, and it was sort of relevant to our earlier meeting, where it's a programme to increase and restore the salt marshes in the Swale. And one of the landowners alluded to it is very much on board with that programme. And we're also working with Peel Ports on a beneficial use of dredging materials, again for salt marsh restoration and creation. Something I'd hoped to be able to give you more of an update this evening, and I can't, but we've been supporting the University of Kent in a bid to Innovate UK to work with the biggest industries in Kemsley on a energy and carbon reduction project, and we should hear very, very soon the outcome of that. Swale's we're the only second-tier authority in Kent that has an active travel coordinator. So we're lucky to have one. I know KCC they've got some staff, but they're struggling they've just re-advertised a post, so it's hard to get people. We're lucky to have one. And we're working on all sorts of projects. There's the local cycling and walking infrastructure project with bids to KCC. We've got the Faversham Crosstown paths. One's already been funded, another one's in development. We've got the Quiet Ways bids, and we've got the Sheppey Light Greenway project. And then we've also, and we spoke about it last time, we've got the exciting project around bicycle. Old bikes have been taken to Swaleside Prison, and the inmates have been trained in stripping them down, rebuilding them, and then they are donated to charities and individuals who are in need of transport. So that's a good project. Lots of things have happened this year. We're moving in the right direction, but looking forward, there are things that we need to address. And in 2019, we did set ourselves incredibly ambitious targets. We had the most ambitious targets in Kent and in parts of the country as well. And that drove us to start doing things which may have waited. So the tree planting, the LEDs, the car clubs, all those things, we've got the momentum going to do that. And we've had our efforts recognised by the Carbon Disclosure Project and the Climate Emergency UK. So it's become apparent, though, that we're not going to meet those inspirational 2025 targets. Although we are moving in the right direction, we remain committed to reducing our emissions and leading our residents in doing their own journey as well. There's a number of reasons for this, including industry not being able to deliver the correct infrastructure and the government changing plans as well. So the borough targets remain a challenge due to central government announcements like delaying the switch to EVs, delayed change and reduced numbers from gas boilers, removal of the requirement for EPCs on rental properties, and the delay to biodiversity net gains rules has been delayed a bit, but it will be coming in later. And here at Swale, we have a very small team, very dedicated, but very small. And we've worked with the steering group to embed this right across the council. And the emergency impacts all of the council's work. The recruitment and retention of experienced climate change staff is an issue right across Kent, with staff leaving for London and other unitary authorities. And we lost at least 10 county-wide last year. Here in Swale, we were without a full-time project officer for several months between Grace leaving and Sam arriving. But we are back up to speed now. And we do need, though, to explore more joint working Kent-wide, and that's going on. And I think you're aware that our chief exec chairs the Kent and Medway Environment Group, and she's driving that forward as well. So we'll be looking to do more joint working. So in order to respond to the challenges, to the target, in order to respond to these challenges, we need to revisit our carbon footprint to establish where we are and how we proceed. And we need to set new actions and revise those actions that are already in the action plan. And we'll need to consider whether we offset, retarget, and the financial situation obviously bears on that. So our options are limited. So we've obtained quotes from the Carbon Trust, who did our original work and are one of the leading organisations in this field and are very well thought of. And this will pick up the process we've made a start on. And also, if they come back and redo our baseline, they will also be able to train officers on how to do it ourselves going forward and how to self-serve. So members are requested to approve the reallocation of some unspent funding in the improvement and resilience funds, which was set aside for the climate and ecological emergency. So we're proposing that during 2024, using this funding, we'll revisit the action plan and then come back to this committee with the revised action plan for adoption. So the proposals are for members to discuss our progress this evening and then take it to full council on the 31st of January, and also to approve the reallocation of £11,000 towards the carbon footprint recalculation.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you for that introduction, and thank you for this amazing report. It's great when you put everything that we've done together in one document. It's, quite astounding. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, it was a really, really good report, and it's obvious that a lot of people have put a lot of hard work into coming up with some exceptional ideas. Not so long ago at another committee meeting, I can't remember which one, it was discussed about different committees working closer together and putting ideas that affect where something goes across multiple committees. And you said about the schools. One of the things that concerns me is we've had a lot of new development in Newington. We've got 4 more, one being quite a large development in the pipeline. Our little village school is full. KCC have said there's no room to expand it because there's no physical space. So all the 106 money for education has gone to a school in Milton to take the overspill of children, which is 3 miles away. So there's going to be a lot of families driving their children to a school 3 miles out of the village. And it just seems to go against the grain with all the fantastic work you're doing. It just doesn't make sense to me that all those children are now going to be adding to the road congestion and the air pollution. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously we are consulted by KCC and we can lobby KCC. Schools, as you know, are the KCC, education is a KCC responsibility, but we are meeting jointly. We've got some workshops coming up jointly with KCC, which Councillor Lehman and Martin and myself will be going to, where we're going to sort of thrash out some of these county-wide issues. But yeah, it's a hard one on the schools. Martin, I don't know if you've got any further.
Yeah, Councillor Palmer, I think a really valid point. As I'm fairly new to working in this field, and it's been great to, as Councillor Lehman says, in terms of seeing the progress. It's very, very clear that in order to achieve the borough targets, we have to have that cooperation against all tiers of public sector and private sector as well. And that's the challenge. That is the massive challenge in trying to get everybody's policies working together in the same way. I think it's a really valid point, and certainly one that I'm happy for myself, Janet and Councillor Lehman at the county away day to raise, because we need all policy. What we've tried to do in our own council is say, whether you're a finance officer, whether you're a planner, whether you work in climate or in waste, we want you to be thinking about the services that we provide and how they impact the environment. And you'll notice that now on every council report, committee report, there is a section on environmental and climate and ecological emergency. And so it's really what we've tried to do through that is embed it in people's thought processes that, yeah, it might make sense for me to save money on this service or change this service because it's better for that particular client base. But we still need everybody to be thinking, okay, but what's the impact on the environment? So whilst we can control that in our organisation, we can't in others, but we can absolutely lobby. And I hope you know that we will be and are lobbying across all those that work in Swale.
And could I just come back? KCC's own climate change team has recently been beefed up, and they've got a very active and some very, very keen officers there who hopefully are now reaching out across that organisation and will be internally working on it as well. And we've definitely got the ear of the climate change team at KCC.
I sympathise with your comment there, because I was at a Children, Young People and Education Committee meeting at KCC last year, and in response to hundreds of homes being built in Northfleet, they were expanding Mepham School, which is 7 miles from Northfleet, rather than one of the ones in Gravesend or Northfleet, because Mepham School was a high-performing one. Then they can just send everyone there, despite the fact that it's 7 miles away. It's just crazy. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second the comments on the report. I think it's an excellent document and a really impressive kind of array of achievements. So really, really well done on that. Kind of a number of hopefully short clarifications that may all be due to my newness to the role and ignorance, so hopefully easy answers. Just for my information and possibly for the public record, who is on the Environment Steering Committee? Would you like to take them one at a time, or shall I kind of bullet point them, which are entirely up to you? All in one go? Absolutely. No problem. So yeah, who's on the steering group? I was particularly interested in the comments that Swales industries are more carbon intensive than the rest of Kent. Is there some kind of clarity around why that is and what's causing that? Also interested in the fluctuation of offsetting. So what's the kind of the root cause of that it was suggested that's changing. So how is that going about? And what's the survival rate of the trees we plant? Because I mean, fantastically impressive achievement on the number of trees we're planting, but if lots of them are dying, then they're not really serving a carbon capture function for very long. And then my final, slightly more of a challenge than a question, is the phrase emerging local plan is doing quite a lot of heavy lifting in this document. And if I'm being pessimistic, I'm struggling to see how a document that is not kind of anywhere near a final stage that could lead to a implementation can have any impact in the time frame we're talking about. So if we have a Damascene conversion and a new local plan is drafted in the next 6 months, and we're looking at some kind of 18-month to 2-year proposal, by the end of 2026, we might have a local plan that's impacting house building. So we might have some houses that are impacted being built in 2027-8, which is well after our initial target and most of the way to our borough-wide target. So it's just a thought from me, really. Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to take the first three and I'll take the last two?
Okay. Yeah, I was going to give you the trees anyway, but yeah, okay. I will take those best I can. The steering group is chaired by Councillor Gould, and we have one member from each party, so it's cross-party. I can't, off the top of my head, give you the names of everybody on that, but most of them are in the room this evening. So Councillor Speed is on it, Councillor Stevens, Councillor Worcester, and apologies if I've left anybody else off.
I think it's Mike.
Oh, sorry, it's Mike, yeah, beg pardon. And then we have, there must be about 15 or 16 officers. So where you see in the beginning of the report, because obviously officers change, we tend to refer to the post rather than the person. But you can see that we've got heads of service, we've got people at more frontline level, depending what they're delivering. So Alistair comes along, obviously Martin, Sam, who's the project officer for climate change. We've got people from planning policy. We've got people from the property team who are looking after Swale House and the rest of our estate. Yeah, we've got people right across the board. I can let you have the membership, but
there's no need to publish it, just out of interest.
yeah, and I mean, it should Councillor Henderson need a sub, you know, we can send you the stuff anyway. So yeah, but yeah, it's very right across the board. Yeah. Industry, historically, Swale, I think because of its position by the water, although the water has not been really used for transport, and because of the brick earth and paper mills, Swale's always had very carbon intensive industry compared with the rest of Kent, combination of what was already here, the sorts of industry. And obviously, there was the employment to balance with that, but there's a real desire to bring down their carbon footprint. Obviously, bringing that down reduces their costs as well. There's lots of opportunity for sharing energy, sharing waste heat, networks, that sort of thing. So the Innovate UK bid was to look at how they can share their energy demand and bring it down. And say, I had hoped, the announcements have been delayed and delayed. I had hoped to tell you some good news this evening, but as soon as we know, I will let people know. Yeah, and we've been asked to sit on the board of that project going forward, should it go forward. And offsetting, I don't know if it's a science or an art, quite frankly. Offsetting has been around quietly, probably 10, 15 years, but it's moving apace, and how you calculate how much carbon a tree takes and how long it has to be growing before it takes, or other methods like the seagrass. Seagrass can often be a better carbon sink than trees. Oysters are brilliant. Oyster shells are nearly all carbon. And, the science is evolving, and there's lots of, and the whole traceability thing, if you offset on site or very close, you can see it. there's not lots of management costs, lots of cuts. If you're giving money to build smokeless stoves in a less developed country, and nothing wrong with that, and I used to work in one, but by the time it's got where it's going, that traceability of the offsetting is very, very difficult. There's no government desire, really, it would have seemed, to do any sort of regulation of offsetting, so it's all voluntary. But what has happened, and it sort of overlaps, and sometimes you can double it up and sometimes you can't, but biodiversity net gain has sort of taken a more of a high profile than offsetting, and that is being more regulated. And obviously we've got the requirement coming at the end of this month on developers of a 10% net gain. The local plan will be 20%. That is feasible in Swale. We've got, again, people will want to do the offsetting and the net gain as close to where they're doing things, developing as possible. But we have got farmers, and it's a cluster that started as 3 farmers. And last count, there were 30 farmers who are working together to do this on their farms, sometimes to counteract their own operations, particularly where they've got cold stores and things, but also to offer up land for this. So there's a lot going on, and we keep in touch with those farmers. And there's also the 3Cs project and the Buds project with Peel Port. So yeah, lots going on, but say it's, 1 minute you think you've got your head around offsetting, and then there's another development, and it is rolling very and the price of carbon is, yeah, so complicated. And I don't profess to know a great deal about it.
And just to add to that, that will be quite a heavy consideration when we do the review of the action plan, because clearly, having just put a number of diesel trucks on the roads to collect our waste for the next 8 years, that's one of the contributing factors to not being able to hit the 2025 target. And we quite simply wouldn't have enough land that we control to be able to offset that over that period. So offsetting is something that clearly needs to play a role, but isn't the solution to everybody's net zero carbon footprint. So it's I think the summary is it's always continually moving. It will play a role, but to what degree we need to consider moving forwards. Survival rate with trees, you're probably catching me at a very bad week to ask me that question, Councillor Gibson, given the amount of vandalism that has happened to projects of mine over the last 10 days. Trees are not immune to that. So survival rate, I couldn't tell you a percentage at the moment, but I could try to find that out. We had a number of things. So in the very hot summer that we're likely to talk about in the last item on your agenda tonight, quite clearly we lost a number because we weren't allowed to water them. So we lost those. So we're slowly working on replacements there. We've learnt with our planting programme that standard trees, i.e. more mature trees, tend to survive vandalism a little bit better than the smaller whips. But clearly cost more. So you either plant less and look after those, or you try and go for the quantum of whips. So we're finding that balance of mature trees and planted whips a little bit more. But yes, absolutely, they fall victim. I've lost count of the amount of times that my officers come to me and said, guess what, another 50 ripped up last night, Martin. It's depressing, if I'm honest, from an officer point of view, and trying to keep them motivated to continue to do these projects. But we will continue because we know it's the right thing to do. So we're trying lots of different things, from random fencing to stop it, because there could be an argument it might be dogs, or it might be children, or it might be grown adults, who knows. So we're trying lots of different things so as we develop the programme. But I would say that more recently we've had a lot more success and a higher survival rate. So we hope many of them will still be there to the point where they get to their success rate of actually taking in the carbon, which they're not currently. Yes, we do use the term emerging local plan, and I wouldn't profess to be an expert on the time frame of that. You're potentially right that by the time it comes in, it's not within the 2025 target or potentially the 2030 target. And that's one of the reasons for putting the look forward plan tonight, is because whilst we wanted that really short-term aspirational target, let's face it, national guidance is 2050, and various other targets are around that. So whilst we still want to keep that aspirational term, the aim of the next action plan is to maybe look at some of those longer term targets as well, that we might not solely focus on in these early next years, but that still show that we need to do that. And so Janet mentioned earlier, we're already, because guess what, we're pushing against an open door with developers. They want to be seen to be doing developments that do that. So we're already getting more than potentially we are able to logistically ask for through the planning committee, and there's been some really good successes on that. So whilst I absolutely take your point, I think when we do the review, we will be looking ahead further to 2050 as well, and clearly the new local plan will fall within that within that time frame.
Great. Councillor Vowles.
Good report. Just some observations I've made on the tables. Why do we not have more current figures when it goes up to 2021? We're in 2024.
So you're talking about the tables at the beginning and the introductions, yes? Yeah, that is the government. We get those figures from central government, and there is a 3-year time lag. So those are as up to date as we can do. Yeah, and that's always been the case for those particular figures for emissions. So yeah, we're giving you the best we can. And if you'll see in the footer, it says Bays as the source of those. Yeah, and we have to wait on government to release them.
Councillor Worcester.
Thanks, Chair. This brilliant report. I thought, obviously, really hard work gone into it. The observation I've got to make about the report has just kind of hit me, and so sorry to do this rather than at the working group, but I think we spent 4 years. I watched Swale develop 4 years. Their climate, really brilliant, groundbreaking, declaring the climate emergency. But I think if we're honest with each other, we know that what really needs to happen is that we need to embed the climate emergency in Swale policy more than what it is at the moment. So instead of it being something that's tagged on to statutory committees, it should be something that is as fundamental as the standing orders for that committee. So initially, my question while I was sitting here, I was thinking, why haven't we ring-fenced the money to have the active coordinator post available at Swale forevermore? And actually, it's a bigger question than that. It's a question of why, for instance, did I sit in a meeting less than 2 weeks ago that talked about changes to the planning committee? And as far as I remember, not many of those changes that were coming for the planning committee talked about how we were going to embed the climate emergency into the way that Swale was going to respond to our planning. I know that the planning stuff comes from central government, I know that, but what I'm talking about is we were so brilliant at drawing a line in the sand 4 years ago and saying this is what Swale stands for. I think it's time to do it again, and I think the only way that that's going to be achievable when we've got no budget is to look at the transformation of our committees to say climate is no longer an addition to what we look at in our daily work at Swale, but is our main driver. We know it's going to be the growth area in terms of where grants and supports are going to come from, or it jolly well should be from central government, because that's the most movement. But I think as a local authority, I would love to see just aspirational that when it comes to looking at this report again, maybe 12 months' time, maybe 24 months' time, I don't know, that instead of it being laid out as fantastically as it is, that it's laid out as to actually what has this statutory committee done to embed the work of the climate crisis work into its procedures. So instead of it being an addition, it is what SWAL lives and breathes. And I'm sure my predecessors, even though they didn't belong to the same political party as me, potentially had that in mind for the way that SWAL was going forward. And I would like SWAL to think about that going forward, that we really commit to looking at climate as a driver for our work in other areas rather than something that's an addition. Thank you.
Yeah, I can completely agree, Councillor Worcester. I think as much as we've had the success of, we think, embedding it certainly across different departments and officers and member views, can we do more? Yeah, absolutely. I touched on that earlier. Difficult in the current budget setting, as you say. So it's about people, it's about members and officers making sure that the questions they're asking when they're putting contracts out or setting policies. Prime example at the moment, the draft parking policy is out, has been out for consultation. There is an active travel and environment section within that. Seems slightly strange having that in a car parking policy, but you know, it's showing that. The same with the planning. You know, whilst I wasn't in that meeting, Councillor Worcester, I know that Janet and the planning policy officers have done a huge amount of preparation work for what policies will be in a new local plan in order to give us that hook to hang things on. So, you know, it's about slowly and surely changing policy. So therefore, I think you're right, every committee that is approving a policy needs to be considering how that policy impacts on our ability to deliver against this plan. So are we doing it? Yes. Can we do it more? Absolutely.
Could I just come back on that, if that's okay, just to be even more, like the sound of my own voice, obviously. I do agree with what you're saying, but I think that what I'm suggesting is that, for instance, the group that I was looking at was actually the planning working group, the one that was attached. And I think that if the government are not going to come forward with strong leads and be airy-fairy about their housing targets and the way they go forward, like, for instance, it was going to be mandatory that active travel coordinators have statutory requirements to comment on planning applications. That hasn't happened, or it got stalled, or it stopped, or something like that. That's the sort of element that I would like to see, because it would mean that, for instance, when Janet talks about having a small, really dedicated team, absolutely, but I want to see SWAL having a bigger dedicated team so that it can take on more work. So, for instance, when we talk about trees that are being destroyed, what is their overall future consumption? I've got 5 emails from all over the borough saying to me, why have those trees been pulled out? Why haven't Kent Police done anything about that? Why hasn't the community partnership done anything about that? And the only thing, I haven't responded, I wouldn't respond, but the only thing that shouts out to me is that that area is not given as much priority as we give it. And that's the thing that should be held to account. It shouldn't be our last question to the Crime Commissioner, why are we spending public money on tree planting? It should be, we're investing in this borough's future. Why are you not following suit with the extra 7% that you're charging residents for protecting our green spaces? Why are they not as a priority to you as they are to our residents? Because it's that sort of fundamental change that I think we're after. And if we're going to change the situation going forward, it cannot be business as usual. And maybe we are looking for something a bit more radical. I don't know, but this report is definitely a brilliant place to start, isn't it?
Thank you. Councillor Shield.
Yeah, just a couple of things really. The report is really good. And when you're at that action day with KCC, I wondered whether you can push the schools or KCC to push the schools to update their active travel plans. We've been working as a town council with Adrian from the LC Whip, and one of the items we keep getting stuck at is your school hasn't got an up-to-date travel plan. Your school hasn't got an up-to-date travel plan. We've pushed it our end, but it's a stumbling block. When we can all work together, if they've got an active travel plan, we can then feed into that and help support the school and their economical side as well. Also, we look at the bigger picture sometimes, and it's great that we do, but also we're sat in front of a table with probably half a ream of paper on it from agenda items and minutes, and they will just go straight in the bin. I think we could do more about that also, because it gives me an absolute headache. As a town council, we went total paperless unless you request it, because it just goes in the bin and it's such a waste.
Fair point. Did Janet? Did you want to come back on
the
that?
paper one, my colleague Sam Brookfield is talking with Democratic Services. It's come out through the Champions group of officers about the amount of paper that goes around in this chamber. And yeah, I mean, one of the reasons apparently while some members were asking for hard copies was that their laptops batteries weren't lasting. Well, now there's a charge point at every seat, so that aspect has been tackled. So I think watch this space. Hopefully something will be happening on that. And Martin, did you want to talk about the schools or?
Just to say, yeah, we'll absolutely raise it, Councillor Shield. Yeah.
If you wanted to, Councillor Shield put forward that as a formal recommendation that we look at going paperless, I would be happy to second that. I will second that, and we can add that as a recommendation tonight. Should we go straight to the vote on that, or has anyone got any strong opinions that they want to give on the council going paperless for meeting agendas unless requested?
I think you'd probably only be able to make it for this committee rather than
Oh, right. Oh, okay.
overall policy, because clearly that would be a P&R decision.
But could we do it for this committee and a recommendation to P&R
Yeah.
for council.
Can I make a comment though? Chairs probably need a hard copy when you're actually chairing the meeting. Trying to read on devices would be a nightmare. But that's probably the only person that needs them.
I agree with that. Yeah, when you're chairing it, it's a bit different, isn't it? Yeah. So, with Councillor Shield's permission, we'll amend the recommendation to be paperless and less requested, or unless chairing, at plus recommendation to P&R to consider doing the same for the other council meetings. I will second that. Any other comments on that, or should we vote on that? Those in favour? That's unanimous. Great. Thank you, Councillor Shield. And sorry, it's Councillor Palmer first, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, it's just another idea to perhaps take through moving forward about offsetting. I've not yet come across a hard-up developer, and there are supermarkets opening left, right and centre all over the place, and none of them are hard up either. We just approved last week at planning a new Aldi's on the island. Was it an Aldi's one? Lidl. Oh, Lidl. Perhaps when we sort of talk about committee discussions, perhaps we ought to start enforcing more conditions on planning for certain developments and say, yeah, you can build a shop, but we'd like your roof to have solar panels. Or if you're going to build a car park, perhaps you can have canopies over the car parking areas with solar panels. It's done all over France. Great big shopping malls are completely self-sufficient of electricity because they have these enormous solar panels all over the roofs of the shopping mall. Developers can afford it, and so can the shops. So perhaps that's something we can do a bit of work on cross-committee ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, as you probably know, we are looking at canopies of solar panels over our own car parks, but yeah, it's a great idea to have them over supermarket car parks too. I think in terms of development, we may be limited in what we can demand, but Janet looks like she's ready to expand on that, so I'll pass over to Janet.
Okay, a couple of things. The Little development has got a considerable number of EV charging points beyond the proportion that we do require. So they weren't pushed hard on that. They offered that up. Yeah, I mean, we encourage developers to put the solar panels. At the end of the day, a lot of it is government policy, and until it's in building regs and demand, they absolutely have to do it. We can encourage them. The new local plan will have a lot more because of the requirements to reduce emissions. So we're doing what we can, and there's quite often when they come across my desk, I'll be pursuing for the EV charging, but I will also ask about solar and other technologies. And there's a new church being built somewhere at the western end of the borough. Sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head. And we went back because the roof was absolutely ideal. And initially they said it wasn't possible, and they've come back and they've said, yeah, they're going to put some in. So yeah, we chip away as best we can. But so hopefully with the new local plan, we'll be able to do a lot more on that.
Happy? Councillor Jackson.
Yes, probably Martin can answer this. There's a lot of antisocial behaviour in my ward at the moment with youths and vandalism. How did you decide where to put the trees? Because I noticed there's a few been planted down good old Whiting Crescent again.
So we did a call for councillor submissions on where they would want them within their ward. And we also, that was probably pre a lot of you being on the council, because obviously we have to apply for funding quite a way back. So for those probably new in May, it would have been pre you guys. And then it's based upon what land we own and where there are other groupings of trees, and that's all done through my tree officer. So looking at native species and obviously groupings of existing trees and adding to them, because if you group them with the existing trees, they tend to be less susceptible to that vandalism. We're persevering with Whiting Crescent. I know there's been a fair amount of vandalism there, but we are persevering there.
I mean, I was on the council in 2019 and nobody consulted me on the trees there. And when I saw them, I asked Councillor Saunders, because he was on environment, and he can't remember that he recommended they were put there. Because at the moment they're holding up, and I am checking on them every Tuesday. But the question mark is, how long do they last?
Yeah, so some were recommendations from ward members, some were from officer decision. So clearly those were from officer decision. Yeah.
Councillor Wise.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll echo what everybody else has said about this being a really good report. Just a small question, really. We have this what goes in your bin tool on the council's website. I think in the report it's called the Waste Wizard tool. I think it's been changed. But have we refreshed that recently? Because there's more that could probably go in there in terms of information about signposting people to where they can take additional recycling if they don't want to chuck it in their green bin. So, for example, lots of supermarkets do have soft plastics recycling. So if you search on that tool about batteries, it will tell you most supermarkets have a provision for you to recycle batteries. But if you search any of the soft plastic stuff, it says pop it in your green bin. And I just wondered whether we could do a bit more in terms of our comms around that, because we do, for example, at Christmas, we put the tool out when there's been, unfortunately, battery fires in bin trucks or large amounts of contamination. So I think I did a search on the Facebook page and it's been promoted about 8 to 10 times last year. We could probably do a bit more around encouraging people to look at other options for some of the things that there are provisions to recycle outside of curbside collections on that tool and publicising it.
It's a great suggestion. Martin?
I'm glad Alistair stayed now because I can pass that one to him.
Yeah, no, it's a very valid point. We're in the process of rolling out the new waste contract, and there's going to be some changes to those curbside collections, which will be, we've already updated all members in one of the all-member updates. We've got another one, I believe, in early February, where we'll be updating members on what on the latest information on that new waste contract. Yeah, absolutely. We will we'll be reviewing the Waste Wizard tool on the website and making sure that all those changes that are implemented from the 24th of March will be reflected on that tool, and trying to promote as many different opportunities for recycling items like the batteries, textiles, waste electrical and electronic equipment in the trade known as WEEE. We'll be trying to promote those opportunities to recycle as much of those streams as possible. But also reusing. The new waste contract will have an opportunity to try and reuse some of the furniture, for example, some of those larger items, using some local charities as well. So we'll absolutely be looking to update that as best as we can with that 24th of March date in mind.
Councillor Stephen.
I just wonder whether Alistair was aware that, do you know the pill packets, the strips and everything? Superdrug, it's one of the pharmacies, you can take them in, and it's scary actually because you take a whole carrier bag in and you think, how many pills have I taken? But yeah, are you aware that they're doing that?
I wasn't personally, but we've got an excellent campaigns officer in place, and I'm sure she would be aware of a lot of those locations. I know in this building alone, we've got our own facilities to recycle those pill packets, and likewise on the reception desk, we've got a container for batteries. So there are many of these opportunities to recycle those specific waste streams. And you're absolutely right, we want to try and signpost people to those opportunities as much as possible.
In response to Councillor Wise, yeah, absolutely. That, once our attention moves from, we've been a bit busy the last couple of years trying to prepare the new contract, but as we move into that mobilisation, that's where our focus will shift on. We absolutely have to encourage higher recycling rates in the borough, not only for the right environmental reasons that we've been discussing tonight, but future funding mechanisms will be based upon our recycling performance as well. And so we absolutely have to work with residents to try and get that a much higher figure than it currently is. So there is a lot of work planned for that campaign process to try and get the things out of the green bin that shouldn't be in there and into the relevant recycling units.
Further to those last 2 points, I would like to see, I don't know how difficult it would be, but we've got the what goes in your bin, blah, blah, blah. If you look up a certain thing, like Councillor Wise suggested, soft plastics, I don't know how difficult it would be to create a tool which says, these supermarkets collect these items, your nearest 5 are this, 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 and this, in ascending distance from where that person is if they enter their postcode. Or even if much more low-tech, just like a JPEG map of either Swale or the main towns with little icons on for blister packs, carrier bags, and so on. Just something that makes it that bit easier for people.
Can I ask a question back? Have you ever kept a directory? because it's almost impossible to keep that up to date and regular. So what the Waste Wizard tool does do is list the ones that we have some element of control of. So we know, and I think you might make a comment in a minute, but we know that we've got the household waste recycling centres. So the Waste Wizard does suggest that that's where certain items can go, because that's more in the control. I think we would stop short of listing specific sites, pharmacies or supermarkets or any others, because it would almost be a full-time job for somebody making sure that that was up to date and regular.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to Councillor Wise first, because 4 hands were up, and I'm hoping he's just going to extend on what he was just asking.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the Recycle Now website does a lot of that, actually. So if you search soft plastics in there, so can we not just signpost people to that website as well, actually? Because part of the issue is that sometimes like retailers will only have that recycling opportunity as a trial at first and all those sorts of things. But a lot of them are becoming more and more just part of what they have to offer. So like with Superdrug offering that, and I think a lot of boot stores do cosmetics, recycling bins and all those sorts of things. So that website should capture a lot of that. So if we could just make sure that's part of our tool, that would be great.
Thank you. Councillor Mr. Stephen.
Yeah, Paul Stephen would have been all right, you know. Is there any way of targeting persistent households that abuse the system? Because I've seen, I mean, close to us, we've got a couple of, they've got 2 blue bins and another 10 boxes full of rubbish that they want to get rid of on a fortnightly basis. And a lot of it is contaminated, and once they refuse to take it. But often the disposal guys would just take the lot and go, and which is going to be totally ruining that load completely. Is there anything in place whereby that? I'm saying they're going to look in the bins, but it's a quick look and note back who's been persistently abusing it, because that's a great way of improving our recycling system. And I would like to see something that, I mean, can you have 2 blue bins? Are you allowed 1 or 2? Is it, and do they pay any more for that?
Alistair? Yeah,
no, good question. People can have more blue bins if they can show that they're demonstrating that they need those recycling bins to recycle more materials. We do look in bins with regards to contamination. So we're working closely with Kent County Council at the moment. We're identifying where our most contaminated areas are, where our biggest problems are. We attend those locations. We will look inside bins, only in the top layer. We don't go pulling everything out because it's not safe to do so. But we will check those bins. We will educate residents. We'll speak to them. We'll try and win them round. The crews who empty the bins also lift the lids routinely, and they'll lock out a bin. That means they won't take it if there's contamination in there. We've got a new waste contract, as I've mentioned, starting on 24th of March. Something we're very keen to do in that policy, in that contract, is to take a slightly more robust approach towards people who are causing this problem. And we'll be coming back to members over the period of the year, probably, with regards to some kind of policy to support that enforcement for tackling people who are causing this problem of contamination. We do tackle it already at the moment with on a much smaller scale, so more individuals who are refusing to use their bins appropriately. That might involve removing the bins or possibly even serving notices on those individuals. But this needs to become more of the norm. If we're serious about tackling contamination and increasing recycling to where it should be, we need to have a more robust approach across the council, and we'll be hoping to come to you for that support or from the new waste contract moving forwards.
Yeah, great. Councillor Miller.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In my ward, I have a number of residents that have contacted me that live on Sittingbourne High Street, and they've been told by Swell Borough Council, apparently, that they're not included in recycling because of their location. I've just wondered if anyone could clarify anything.
Can we take that as a specific question to us outside of this meeting? Obviously, it's not necessarily relevant to the climate action plan item that we're on, and there are some nuances on the high street, but we can talk you through those.
Yeah, I just thought if that is the case, obviously a lot of people living on the high street missing out on being able to take part in recycling, so I did think it was relevant, but okay. Thank you.
Councillor Vowles.
So I'm going to take it back to Councillor Palmer, which seems like a lifetime ago because I had my hand up for about 5 minutes. So regarding Lidl, there will be solar panels on the roof and they do build sustainably.
Good stuff. Anyone else? Councillor Shield.
Just to jump in on the whole recycling situation, I work in education, so I can probably say this. You very rarely can teach an old dog new tricks. So we really need to be channeling our focus in on the education side and making sure that we're promoting that to schools and the children, because they're the ones that are more likely to tell their parents off and enjoy recycling.
Does anyone want to comment on what?
No, other than my daughter regularly comes home and tells me exactly what I should be doing, so I agree.
Great. We've had a nice long debate on this, which is good. If Councillor Harrison was here, she'd be complaining that I let people speak more than once, but she's not, so that's good. So let's move to the recommendations. We've certainly discussed the progress, and there's a second recommendation in here which we haven't really touched upon, which is to approve the reallocation of £11,000 improvement and resilience funds towards the carbon footprint recalculation project to provide the evidence for revising the action plan. Do I have a proposer for that? Councillor Worcester, would someone like to second? Councillor Gibson. And how does this work? We've already voted on recommendation 3. We don't need to vote on that again, do we? The one.
Oh yeah, just those two. Yeah.
Great. Those who are for recommendations 1 and 2. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. And on to our final item of the meeting. Oh no, penultimate item of the meeting, because there's probably work programme. Barbecues in public spaces. Is this going to be you, Martin?
It is.
Over to Martin.
Yeah, apologies, a late call away for my Green Spaces manager, so you've got me on this one. There was a motion to council following the very hot summer, not last year, but the year before. Unfortunately, we weren't that lucky last year. There was a motion that talked about the impact of disposable barbecues in public open spaces, and there'd been across the country a spate of fires, and particularly large fires that could be attributed back to it. So at the time the motion was approved, was referred to the Environment Committee from Council. We considered it, and what we said was, this is the current situation and we'd like to monitor it over the summer of 2023 to see whether we could provide specific evidence for the committee, and that was approved. We also said that we would write a lobbying letter, which was sent under the chair at the time, Councillor Julian Saunders, name to government in order to say that we supported the London Fire Commissioner's view that there should be a national ban on the sale of disposable barbecues. I'm not aware that that legislation has come forward yet, but certainly the lobby was sent. What we then did is we worked with Kent Fire and Rescue to review their statistics over last year. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you read it, there wasn't a high propensity of fires that were attributed back to that position. In fact, only 4 in the borough of Swale during that period, and none of most of them. So one of them, for instance, when we looked at it in more detail, was a fire under a railway bridge that had one of them, but wasn't necessarily an impact on, say, a beach or a park or things like that. So the summary of the report is that whilst the intention was to look at bringing in further enforcement options so that we could restrict their use in our open spaces, there are bylaws in place for the parks, but as the report says, they're as effective as the resources that you have to do them, to obviously conduct them, and they don't result in an immediate penalty for the individual. You have to go through the magistrate courts process, and often the deterrent is not there through that process. So the alternative that is something called the Public Spaces Protection Order, and that's a piece of antisocial behaviour legislation where it covers, for instance, alcohol control zones. Our dog fouling zones and orders are covered under that. Canterbury Council at the time were looking to implement a PSPO and have successfully done so, although last summer they didn't issue any fixed penalty notices. They are looking to do so more so in 2024. However, the low propensity of reports at Kent Fire and Rescue wouldn't provide us with the adequate evidence to be able to go out to consultation on a public spaces protection order from that. So what this paper says is we don't want to forget the motion, but ultimately what we want to do is the Community Safety Unit and my officers continually monitor those statistics, and as and when, if we see a spike, then come back to this committee with justification for a public spaces protection order. So the recommendations are to note the report and not proceed with a specific PSPO ban, and that officers continue to monitor the situation. Happy to take questions.
Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, I think it's a perfectly sensible proposal, and that's exactly how we should proceed. Just a question really is, did any officers look at the possibility of kind of more actively encouraging responsible use of disposable barbecue? So there are some parks and beachfront locations in other councils and other countries where they have kind of stands with specific disposable systems where you can put a disposable barbecue in safely, not touching the ground, and then have a system for disposing of them. So I wondered if it'd be possible to investigate those. I mean, there will certainly be a cost, and it may well be prohibitive. I don't know that, but it seems like it'd be worth investigating if it was a possibility, and I would be strongly in favour of encouraging good behaviour before we start banning and fining bad behaviour. Thank you.
When we were in the research position, we did look at a number of the other councils. Obviously, we're quite fortunate in that we've got one, a nearby neighbour that had been looking at it, but certainly we reached out to some of the more coastal towns further along the south coast. So we're absolutely aware of those. From our point of view, it was purely one of resource and finance in terms of providing that. So we looked at, provision of bins so that you can put them in there without setting fire to litter bins and everything. And all of that is possible. It's just allocating the budget in order to do so through the budget setting process. So.
Councillor Speed.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm actually disappointed that the recommendation is not to proceed with a PSPO. As the report highlights, disposable barbecues are a serious fire hazard, especially if they're not put out properly. They can cause serious damage to grassed areas and property, as well as injuring or killing wildlife and a threat to human life as well. I understand the pressure on resources to enforce it, but Canterbury did introduce a PSPO in February of last year, so that council clearly reached a different conclusion. Looking at paragraph 2.12, as Martin has mentioned, Kent Fire and Rescue identified 4 fires in Swale that were linked to disposable barbecues last year. They were in the public realm. Apparently, it can't be confirmed whether they were actually in public open spaces controlled by the council. But I find it a bit surprising that Kent Fire and Rescue's record keeping is so poor. They don't know exactly where fires have broken out. But it does seem that if we proceed with this recommendation, we're basically saying, okay, we'll just keep our fingers crossed that there's no major incident. And personally, I'm not comfortable with that, so I will not be voting in favour of this recommendation. If the committee is minded to approve it, I would just ask that we do monitor this very closely. We study the results from Canterbury this year and the fines that they issue, and we make a point of re-evaluating it at the end of the summer. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Did you want to come back on that, Martin?
Yeah, I think certainly the latter one is exactly what recommendation 2 is there for. We've got good relations with Canterbury Seafront and Parks team, and so we'll be able to get that. What I would say in response of how they were able to do it, there were many more during their research year. There were many more occasions, one of particular note where a disposable barbecue took out about 15 beach huts on the seafront, and so they were able to show a much greater evidence to be able to bring the PSPO in than our current statistics. So that's the only difference.
Further to, this is the second time this evening I'm going to do this, further to your comment, would you like to add a third recommendation that this not specifically outlined here that this will come back to this committee? Would you like to add a recommendation 3 that it comes back to the committee in November of this year, or whenever the nearest appropriate meeting is to that time?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd be very happy to put forward that motion. And just to respond to Martin's comment, I always do struggle with not coming up with proposals because that incident hasn't happened yet. I think we should anticipate the fact that it might do and put the measures in place before it happens, not react to it after the event.
I sympathise with that because I've spent the last 3 years at KCC trying to get speed limits lowered, and unless someone has been killed, it's nigh on impossible. It's unfortunate. Martin.
I'll echo you in sympathising. I also feel that. However, the Public Space Protection Order legislation requires there to be that evidence base before it happens. So I can't act against that.
Councillor Worcester.
Thank you, Chair. I will just say that more damage, more lives were put at risk last year by an event held at Barton's Point where lots of aeroplanes were letting off fireworks in the heatwave. So this smacks to me of something of using public money to crack a nut. And I'm okay with not doing that. I think that it should be relative to the data. And as Kent Fire and Rescue are not here to defend themselves, I'm not going to criticise the way they collect their data or report to us. I'll just rely on the fact that we're doing a robust question and answer thing with them to make sure they bring forward the right data. So, no, I'm perfectly happy to go with this recommendation. And hopefully we'll look at the main priorities faced by our residents in future, because I honestly, I think this could well do without being even raised, to be honest with you. It's my personal opinion, but I think we've got much bigger problems to deal with than barbecues. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wise.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I will support the recommendations because whilst I understand why this motion was brought forward, particularly in the context of that really long hot summer that we had, and we saw instances right across the country of these causing quite a lot of damage, PSPOs haven't been effective where we do have them in the borough. We've got one for Sittingbourne High Street that's supposed to prohibit drinking in the street, and not a day went by this summer where you didn't walk by and see people sat in shop doorways drinking. So we do, if we're going to have this thing, we would be setting an expectation for our residents that actually we will be able to utilise this in the way that they would then expect it would be used. And actually I think the pressure needs to be on retailers to not sell them, and correctly, as the previous chair has done, and perhaps it's worth us considering restating this position ahead of the summer to the government, that we would expect them to take some action around this. And if they aren't willing to, I think it's pressure on retailers that is the way forward on this, because that's where people are buying them from, and that's what will cause this. I don't think the PSPO would actually be the answer in this instance.
Okay, do we have any further questions or comments? In which case, Councillor Wise, would you like to make that a recommendation that I write to government to reaffirm former Councillor Saunders' letter and request that consideration is given to a ban on disposable barbecues?
Yeah, I'll propose that.
I will second that. I will also second Councillor Speed's proposal that we bring back another report to this committee in the latter part of this year to give us the statistics that we've gathered from both Swale and Canterbury for the summer of 2024. Does that sound okay, Martin? So, if we take a vote, please, on recommendations 1 and 2, first of all, and then we'll do 3 and 4 separately. So the first 2 recommendations, those that are in the report, are to note the report and not proceed with a PSPO ban, and that the officers continue working with the Community Safety Partnership to monitor statistics of barbecue-related fires within Swale and monitor the impact of other councils' bans. Those, actually, I'm going to propose that myself, and who would like to second those 2? Councillor Miller will second. And those in favour of the recommendations 1 and 2? And those against? So that is however many there are in the room, -1 to 1.
10-1. Philippa, happy?
11. I voted too.
Oh, I missed you.
Yeah.
11-1.
Recommendation 3, proposed by Councillor Speed, seconded by myself, is that we bring back another report to this committee in the latter part of this year in the region of November with statistics from summer 2024. Those in favour of recommendation 3? Those against? So that's 11-1. And recommendation 4 is that the chair of the Environment Committee, myself, writes to government once more to encourage isn't a strong to restate our position and request that consideration is given to a ban on disposable barbecues. And that was proposed by Councillor Wise, seconded by myself. Those in favour? That one is unanimous. Great, thank you very much. And is there agenda item 8 is the work programme, or here, sorry, it's called Forward Decisions Plan. Do we actually ask for comments on this?
You can do.
Does anyone have any comments on the Forward Decisions Plan or questions? No, that's great. Thank you. In that case, I will call this meeting to a close at 8:31. Thank you very much.